Hello everyone, today we're taking a look at, well, mainly we're taking a look at the Foxeer Apollo digital camera. This would be a camera for running your DJI FPV system, so something like your Air Unit or the Air Unit Lite. These have also been referred to as Caddx Vistas. And we have these two cameras here, and obviously this guy here on the left, the lime green or fluorescent green, has a much larger lens on it, and that is the Starlight version. I've got the boxes out here as well, so you can get a good idea. Right there, a Starlight, a standard black, fluorescent green. They say Foxeer Apollo digital 720p, 60 frames per second, 3 milliseconds on the latency. Really know how possible that is with the DJI system to get anything below, say, 22 milliseconds. So that seems like maybe it's missing another number. But that's just me. Also note it's 16 by 9 on both of these. I use the digital MIPI connector. These are micro cameras, so their measurement for mounting is about 19 millimeters. Front to back on the Starlight is 24 millimeters. Front to back on the standard is just about 24.5 millimeters. The standard lens weighs about 8.5 grams. And with the Starlight, it weighs almost 9 grams. This is the Foxeer 4 antenna. Got the UFL connector on there, so you might run that with your Vista as well, or any other VTX. Here is the box on that. I have not tried these. I just want to show you these two. These are left-hand polarized. I don't know why they send me left-hand polarized. I don't tend to use left-hand polarized antennas at all. Right hand is kind of more standard, but if you're out racing with buddies or something like that, or flying with buddies, it comes in handy to be left-hand polarized sometimes. And this is the Lollipop 4 Plus. I have not tried these, and at this time, with winter setting in pretty hard, doing a build, it's going to take me some time before I actually put these into place, so I thought that I would just briefly mention them in today's video. We also have the Foxeer Reaper all-in-one flight controller. This is kind of a 2-in-1 or a 3-in-1 if you count the OSD, so it's a flight controller, ESC, and the OSD chip, which is that guy right there. We do have this connector here on the side, and you can see those solder pads. While they're really tiny here around the edges, they do extend around the edge, so that does give you the ability to put your wire in vertically and then solder to that. These are actually labels for these pads over here, I do believe. And then this is where our battery lead goes over here as well. And then a little look at the bottom side here. Let's plug it in, see how many UARTs it's got. Boy, look at all those UARTs. This thing has got 8 UARTs on it. That's crazy. Crazy to someone like myself who does micros. Maybe, if you want to run GPS and some other things, got all those UARTs to work with. And also, as you can see there in the top right-hand corner near the update firmware button, we do have black box on there as well. That's important to some people. You like to tune via your black box. We've got that 16 megabytes of black box that we can use. And this little tiny guy has got a 45 amp ESC, and it is 2 to 6S compatible. So, yowzers. Definitely can build more than just a micro with it. Maybe you want to build a super light racing rig with a Foxeer Reaper. But I want to take a quick look. Let's get back to the Apollo cameras and let's take a look at our footage. First up is the Apollo Standard. By standard meaning not Starlight or not nighttime vision. Do keep in mind this is 60 frames per second, and some people would prefer to have 120 frames per second on all their cameras. Basically, that comes to a feel. Some people have reported that they feel like when they fly with the 60 frames per second that something's off or broken, or it's hard to feel connected to the quad. I don't tend to suffer from that, so I mention it only so that you're aware in case you haven't heard from others. I think it's one of those things, unfortunately, like a lot of things in this hobby, that one has to experience it for themselves before they kind of can establish whether it's something that's going to be for them or not for them. But it's what we've got, so I'm going to show it to you, and unfortunately I can't relay more than just my thoughts on the 60 frames per second versus 120 frames per second. I think there's a much bigger change when you go from analog to digital than when you go from 60 frames per second digital to 120 frames per second digital. I think there's a much bigger separation between digital and analog than there is between the two different digital sorts of cameras. And this is specific to the, as I showed you previously, the DJI-based FPV system, the Air Units or the Air Unit Lite. But we cruise around the neighborhood as we do. You can see we've got the Christmas lights. We'll get to see the Christmas lights in the night comparison as well. And I compare these two cameras basically because I couldn't find my other Starlight camera. I think there was a Polar that was a Starlight camera, and I rummaged through my drawers and I can't seem to locate it. So unfortunately, in the night comparison, it's going to be short because it's terrible cold after the sun goes down, and it's just going to be between the Standard and the Starlight. But I think that's kind of interesting because, well, when we get to it, we can talk about it more. Something else that I noticed, you may have picked it up when we flew by the pumpkin on the front sidewalk there. I thought that was a little bit of a strange shade of orange. And also, I think the reds on the pickups are a little bit brighter red than they are in real life. Although I do think the fire hydrant that's back there is pretty spot on. So kind of a red variation there between the different views, and those different hues of red, they really appear quite differently depending upon the camera. But overall, as far as all the other colors that I see, yeah, it looks pretty good. I do pull up to the garage here so we get a look at the straight line so we can tell if there's fish eye that's going to be an issue for us or not. But I want to move fairly quickly here because we do have a couple of views to look at before we get done with this video. So let's go into the Starlight version. As you can tell when you see the prop spinning on the very edge of the view, this is a different quad, obviously, but it is the same day. I try to do that on all the camera tests when we're doing similar cameras, is try to do them within 30 minutes of one another, so I have to set up two different quads in order to accomplish that. So the previous one had black props, this one has orange props. This is the Baby Hawk 2 HD, in case you wanted to know. So we have very, very similar lighting. It could change in the 30 minutes between the two flights. It's actually not 30 minutes. It's within 30 minutes, probably within, say, 10 minutes, actually. But I try to fly essentially the same sort of path, so you get the same sort of views. We fly through the shadows where we do have shadows. Unfortunately, this time of year, most of the leaves are on the ground. They're no longer on the trees, and the leaves are a different color. So that does cut down our comparison here with being able to see summertime colors versus wintertime colors. But it's what we've got. It's what we've got to deal with. And again, I thought the reds appeared very, very similarly between the Starlight and the Standard, but that doesn't, not terribly surprising because it's the same sensor. The Starlight lens should allow in more light, so therefore at nighttime it should be a little bit more flyable and easier to see in darker portions. But I didn't find there to be that big a separation. I'm kind of spoiling my upcoming footage, but I actually did the nighttime footage twice because I was a little bit surprised at the lack of difference between the Standard lens and the Starlight lens. Maybe there are other videos out and you can do a comparison on that nighttime footage to see what those videos show. But in my comparison, I don't think there's a huge difference. Of course, I'm not the most discernible when it comes to camera images. I think many other people out there who watch the videos and make comments about them are more knowledgeable about sensors and lenses and being able to have that keen eye towards differences, and especially when it's something that you're looking specifically for in your camera. Because this is the view that you enjoy with a DJI FPV experience, and you want to get the most out of it, and I can appreciate that. And these cameras are not cheap, so people want to get what they want with the dollars that they spend. I respect that, and therefore I don't have a lot of opinions about too many cameras. I'm not going to be able to tell you, I think you should get this one over that one. I really depend on you taking a look and doing your own comparison and making up your own decision. Most of the cameras that I find that we use for DJI are fine. It just comes down to whether it's 60 frames per second or 120 frames per second. For me, again, it's not that big a deal for one another, but other people feel much differently. And maybe you have the opportunity to try it out with some local flying club people that you might have or something like that nature. There's that pumpkin again, and it had that strange color again. But we finished up the flight. Let's go into our nighttime comparison. Okay, so I don't have these labeled, and I did that intentionally. I wanted you to get the view, and of course these are happening at different times, but it's on the same day. Again, it's probably within, in this case I probably went back inside between these for about 5 or 10 minutes just to kind of warm myself up, because as I said, I live in the Midwest. After the sun goes down, as reasonable as our weather's been during the day, it does get quite cold as the sun goes down at nighttime. So I have to go back in and kind of warm myself up a touch in order to be able to come back out and do another walk around. I do kind of speed this footage up from time to time to give them somewhat of a fighting chance of being similar, so you have times within the comparison that you'll be able to make those diagnostic views, and you'll be able to tell, you know, what the difference is between these two cameras. It doesn't line up great, but I do what I can. I'm not a great editor on these sorts of things, but we have some moments within here that we can definitely compare. So you may want to go back and hit the pause button from time to time. Now I walk clear down here to the street corner because it's much darker down here. This doesn't reflect it because I think both cameras show it in much better light than it actually is. So that's a little bit of a hard thing to, you know, experience. And I completely messed up how my pattern on these two things, but I just came down here to the edge to get a much darker view. And with this much light and with all the Christmas lights out, it's, you know, there's quite a bit of light in the neighborhood, even though we don't have street lights. So I went ahead and I did another nighttime comparison, and we're going to do that out back. And now I've brought in the labels so that you know which one was the Starlight and which one was the Standard. Obviously, the Starlight was on the left and the Standard was on the right, just like I had them on the table before we went to the flight footage. Let's go into that second nighttime view that I put together here. This is out back of the house. I think I did a little better job following my pattern and editing this section together. But not perfect, of course. I don't have one rig that I can put these cameras on. I heard Kramer has a really nice rig for DJI camera comparisons. I need to look into that further to see how he set things up. But I think it would still take probably 2 air units in one quad, and I don't have a quad big enough for 2 air units. I suppose I could rig something up to a board like I used to for analog camera testing and just run a PCB and a 4-cell battery and power them that way, and then record right to the air units. That might be doable. But this is what I've got, and I wanted to show it to you. It's not a whole lot of footage. We got about 95 seconds of footage here, but this is really dark out back, and that's why I came out back, because I couldn't tell much of a difference in the front with all the Christmas lights. So I wanted to come out back, give it a second go, and see if there was more difference. Now, to me, it's not dramatic. There is a difference, but it's not dramatic. I expected a more dramatic view. So there we are, just kind of a quick look at these cameras and the Lollipop 4 and the 4 Plus, as well as the Foxeer Reaper all-in-one 45 amp 2 to 6S ESC. I'll definitely keep this around. We probably won't see this in a build or these antennas on anything from this channel until we get probably into February and maybe even March, when things start to warm up and I can get back outside, because whenever I do a build, it always takes me about a week to work in a tune on a build. Because I do fly various things at various times. I can't dedicate, you know, an entire flying session to just one new build. But we have the Foxeer Apollo that are now available. I don't think I measured the lens on these. Let me do that real quick. So the standard lens on the Apollo looks to be at almost 14 millimeters. And the Starlight, if you go by this little outer ring, it's almost 18 millimeters. And then if you want the measurement of the inside ring, it's almost 16 millimeters. So there you go, 2 Foxeer cameras for your digital DJI FPV system that you can choose to use if there's something that catch your eye, if you like the view. Again, they're 60 frames per second. I want to make sure that's probably the most important feature about these cameras, and most people out there, they want to know whether they're 60 frames per second or 120 frames per second. So that means in your goggles, when you go to change the settings, you will only have high quality mode available to you. You will not have low latency mode available. And as it stated on the box, 16:9 only. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please let me know in the comments section below. I appreciate your time. And thanks for watching.